everyone, it's Alma with the Cat's Pajamas, and today I want to show you how to use stamps and dies to make an elegant and simple embossed spring card. Because this cutting board is not such a great surface to stamp on, I'm going to be using foam underneath my project. For this card, I'm going to be using our Patterned Petals stamp set. It has a bunch of really great flowers and sentiments, and it also has coordinating dies for the flowers. I'm going to stamp using VersaFine Deep Lagoon. It's a large sentiment, so I'm going to stamp on a piece of scratch paper to see if there's anywhere on the stamp that I need to apply extra pressure. Looks pretty good. Now it's time to stamp on the good piece of paper. Now I'm going to ink up the biggest flower using Marvy ink. This color is rose pink. Using Marvy inks for my polymer stamps. The ink pad isn't too wet, so the ink doesn't bead up on the stamp, so it gives me a sharper image. However, because the ink pad is a little bit dry, I like to huff on the stamp a little bit after I ink it up, just to be sure I get a good image. Next, I'm going to stamp the next biggest flower using Marvy's Bubblegum Pink. Because I'm going to be embossing these flowers with my dies, I want to leave a little bit of room in between each flower. Now that the biggest flowers are done, I'm going to fill in with the smaller flowers. This smaller flower, I'm going to be using Marvy's Pink ink. Now I think I'm going to want something here. Maybe just the top part of the plaid flower. I like that. I think that's all this card needs as far as flowers are concerned. This stamp set comes with a bunch of different pattern centers, so I'll use the VersaFine Deep Lagoon again, just to pull the colors together. And I think the checked pattern for this plaid flower. And I think the small checked version for the polka dotted flower. And I think that's it. I'm going to be running this card front through the die cut machine, so I'm going to heat set it just to make sure that the ink is completely dry. I don't want any smearing. Now let's emboss. For the Cuttlebug, we'll be using the A plate, the B plate, embossing rubber, and a second B plate. The embossing formula varies with each die cutting machine, so you'll have to see what embossing formula works with your machine. We'll be using dies from the Petal Posy cut-ups and the 5-petal posy cut-ups. They match up perfectly with the flowers from the stamp set we used. Place the paper we just stamped on the embossing rubber and place the corresponding die over the stamped image. Then we'll use low-tack tape to hold the die in place. Now the plaid flower. You can see why we left so much space between the flowers. This allows for the dies to be placed next to each other. Next, the dotted flower. We'll do the last flower on a second run. I don't want the embossing to be too deep. I just want kind of a pillow effect. So I'm going to cover everything with the B plate and run through the die cut machine. If I wanted a deeper impression, I would add a shim or a couple of sheets of paper to the top of the B plate. Now let's see what we have. Perfect. I just wanted a little embossing. Can you see it? Just a little pillow effect. Just adds a little bit of texture, and that's what I want. Because this card is pretty busy, but I wanted to add just a little bit more oomph. Now let's do this last flower. Start with a piece of 4 1/4 by 11-inch paper scored at the halfway mark. Fold in half and crease well. Now a bit of fun striped paper. I'll be using a layer of silver paper in the card just for a bit of shine, and also a piece of pale pink cardstock. You'll notice the back side of the panel. I didn't test the stamp before I used it, and the stamp missed a spot, so I turned it over and stamped on the back. That's why God made paper with 2 sides. Now I'll layer this panel onto a piece of pink paper, and then onto the silver. I'll add a bit of foam tape to make the image pop even more. Now, even though this card is clean and simple, I think I'll add a bit of twine to make it a little bit more rustic. I'll be wrapping the twine around the front of the card 4 times, so I'll measure the width of the card 3 times for the front and the back and the bow, and measure that length 4 times and cut the ends. Now the bow. I have stamping friends that can tie the perfect bow every time, but I'm not one of them. So I tend to fuss around with my bows a little bit. So now you're forewarned. Now let's scooch the bow to the right side of the card, and we're going to add the panel to the front. Maybe a little bit more to the right. There, I like that look. Now let's add the panel to the front. And you'll notice that the way I put the foam tape horizontally allows for even more scooching if the bow isn't placed exactly right. Just a little bit more fussing with the bow. And I think that's it. I like to add a little bit of crystal effects to the knot once I get the bow how I like it so it stays knotted. Now I think this card needs a little bit of sparkle, but not too much. So I'm going to add these matte crystal rhinestones that I picked up at Michael's. Just a couple here and there. And I'm going to call this card done. It was easy to make this elegant embossed card using stamps and their coordinating dies. I hope you'll give it a try. Have a great day.